Take three. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the COVID-19 Relief and Recovery Committee of the 30th of June 2020. Apologies for the technical issues. We are trying to live stream tonight's meeting on YouTube. We're always trying to test new things, and sometimes that brings a few little teething issues with it. So thanks for your patience. I'll officially declare the meeting open at 5:06 p.m. and start by acknowledging that we meet on the lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Item 2, apologies, members on leave of absence. We have all committee members accounted for this evening. Item 3, public question time and receiving of public statements. We do not have anyone in the public gallery here this evening, and I'll just confirm the Manager of Governance is indicating that we haven't received any written questions for tonight's meeting. Response to previous public questions taken on notice are contained in the agenda papers. And moving on to declarations of interest, item 4. CEO, have you received declarations of interest for this evening's meeting?
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. I've made a declaration myself in relating to impartiality in relation to item 7.3 on the Leadable Gardens Inc. Trust, COVID-19 Relief Fund recommendations for Derbyl Yerrigan Health Service Aboriginal Corporation. The extent of my interest being that my spouse is employed by Derbyl Yerrigan Health Service. The second one is from Councillor Castle, which is to reiterate the declaration of interest from last week's meeting in relation to item 10.1, Councillor Castle's declared an impartiality interest, noting that Councillor Castle has a personal association, being an acquaintance with applicant number 10 for the record. And just wanted to confirm whether the other committee members had any declarations related to this item which carried over from last week.
Yes, CEO. I think last week I declared also in relation to what was applicant 7, but this week applicant 10, that I also declared an partiality interest in that I had a personal association acquaintance with one of the applicants involved.
Noted. And Councillor Gondaszewski.
I also declared the same interest at last week's meeting in relation to, and would like to make the same declaration tonight in relation to, I believe it's applicant 10.
Noted, we'll record that in the minutes.
Thank you very much. Item 5, applications for leave of absence. Just to note that at the ordinary council meeting on the 11th of February, council had approved Councillor Gondaszewski to have leave from the 29th of June to the 4th of September 2020, and Councillor Gondaszewski has requested that this leave of absence be cancelled. Deepest apologies that had to happen and that you're not flying into an exotic location. Are there any other applications for leave at this time? No. Okay, thank you. And confirmation of minutes, item 6. This is for the committee to adopt the minutes of the COVID committee meeting of the 23rd of June 2020. Could I have a mover and seconder, please? Moved Councillor Castle, seconded Councillor Gondaszewski. All those in favour? Declare the minutes carried. Okay, first item of business, as always, is 7.1, COVID-19 weekly update. Can I call for a mover and seconder, please? Move Councillor Castle, seconded Councillor Gondaszewski. I have no questions on this, thank you, Mayor. Councillor Gondaszewski.
No, nothing from me this week.
Okay, I'll just go to the Manager of Built Form and Wellbeing just to see whether there are any comments that you wish to add other than those that are already contained in the report this evening.
Through you, Mayor Cole, the transition from phase 3 to phase 4 has been fairly seamless. I think people are generally pretty excited about the additional activities that they can do. The only thing that I will say is that we have received some information today from the Department of Health. Obviously, they're watching the Victorian situation very closely, and I think that will be providing some dialogue in the next update around that and around what the city needs to do, particularly around maintaining public awareness and messaging.
Yes, very scary developments happening in Victoria. So thank you very much for that, Manager. I also don't have any further comments, but thank you for the update. So I'll put the item. All those in favour? I think your hand's disappeared. There it is. Declare that carried. Okay, item 7.2 is financial assistance recommendations for city tenants. This tonight is relevant to Belgravia Leisure Group Proprietary Limited. Could I have a mover and seconder, please? Moved Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded Councillor Castle.
The only question that I had on this was in relation to the extension of the recommendation to recommend to council in relation to the extension of the lease and contract to facilitate the payment arrangement. My question is whether it is considered that it is would be impossible for Belgravia Leisure as an entity to meet their obligations without the surety of another year of the lease. I remain somewhat unconvinced about the link, so I would appreciate some further explanation.
Go to the manager. Sorry, the CEO, are you taking this?
Through you, Mayor Cole, just to clarify that the proposal is in alignment with the federal and state government guidelines around repayment terms for lessees. We wouldn't be in a position to advise exactly what Belgravia's capacity to pay is, other than to note that it is a large, or one of the largest national providers of health and management services for facilities it doesn't own, and my understanding is that they have benefited from federal government schemes like JobKeeper, and they are, my understanding is that they're still financially viable, but that does depend on the impact on some of the other facilities, including in Victoria, for instance.
Can you just advise if the recommendation has been something that was put forward or requested by Belgravia Leisure in relation to the lease, or is that something that is being suggested by administration?
Through you, Mayor Cole, we have discussed the recommendation with Belgravia, and they believed that the 24-month repayment period was that would work for them. So that's why we're recommending this to the committee, and we would need then an extension of the lease. So I guess it's been in consultation with Belgravia that we've come to this recommendation.
So you're saying that it would be impossible to have a 24-month repayment period or an agreement in relation to the repayment of deferred fees unless there was a current lease in place?
Through the chair, I think that's how the mandatory code is set out, and I think the logic for that is that they need to be a trading entity in order to actually, receive revenues and then be able to make that payment. So
I don't believe there's any suggestion that Belgravia would cease to be a trading entity as an entity, given what the CEO's comments are in relation to.
Yeah, so it's through the chair, it's drawing a clear link between what is being waived and then the business activity that generates the revenue that pays off that waiver, if you like.
Could I make a procedural suggestion at this point? That clause 3 could read that notes that administration will intends to recommend to council, etc., rather than the COVID committee making this recommendation. I think procedurally that would be a better way to go.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. I would feel more comfortable with that. I'm happy to move that as an amendment.
Can I have a seconder, please? Seconded by Councillor Castle. So the amendment would be to clause 3 that it notes that administration intends to recommend to council a 1-year extension, etc. Okay, all those in favour? I declare that amendment carried. We're back to the substantive. Councillor Gondaszewski, do you have further questions?
No, nothing further.
Okay, Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. I just have a question around item 1. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is the first time we've seen the sinking fund contributions and loan repayments as part of the waiver and deferral items. And from a very quick look back at previous items that were dealt with under this code, some included rent and some also included variable outgoing. So I'm just wondering if we can get some commentary on why they're being included this time.
Through you, Mayor Cole. So the other tenants that we've made recommendations to the committee in respect to don't have loan repayments or sinking fund contributions. So that's why it hasn't been considered previously. And Belgravia's request was for a deferral or waiver of all payments. But I have, and the attachment does set out what the loan and the sinking fund contributions are. So we can, if you wanted to consider those amounts and whether they should be included, we can do that.
Yes, I can see that actually the loan repayments is the bulk of the money that is proposing to be waived and deferred. I'm not really clear how the loan repayments in particular are different to the situation we dealt with a couple of weeks ago with Subiaco, I think, who had outstanding amounts that were owing. East Perth, sorry, thank you, CEO. And how these loan repayments are different to that situation?
Through you, Mayor Cole. So this loan relates to, and actually apologies, I don't know the whole background, but when the building was constructed, Belgravia was required to pay back the cost of that over the term of the lease, while East Perth Football Club's debt related to outstanding variable outgoing and turf maintenance costs from 2015-16, and we dealt with them by getting their agreement to pay them back over the deferred period. While in this case, we were looking at just waiving a portion, so I think 27%, and then deferring the payment of the other portion of the loan repayments.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm really not sure how this fits into the code that we've been following from our own for our own purposes and from the state government, and how these loan repayments fit into that. Is there any guidance in the code about extra payments?
Through you, Mayor Cole, the code doesn't require us to defer or waive any portion of the loan repayments, as far as I'm aware, but in the principle of working with Belgravia, we believed that it was reasonable to waive and defer a portion of that in line with their downturn.
Well, I'd be interested to hear the thoughts of other councillors. I think at this point, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with waiving those loan repayments. I have less problem with the deferral of them, but I'm a bit undecided about that. I think that becomes a burden on the city, and I don't believe that those loan repayments have a particularly close connection with the current COVID situation. They've been in place for a long time.
Perhaps we could go to our Director of Community and Business from a financial perspective, because I take that point that loan repayments then becomes an impost on the city to take on board on behalf of our community and with our reduced revenue streams coming in. And I'm just sort of, whilst I think it's within the city's scope to assist Belgravia, I would like to ask a few questions around the sinking fund contributions and loan repayments aspect. I'm thinking that's probably just extending our requirements beyond the code, and then I think we just need to really consider the impact that that has for the city and our ratepayers.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'm just looking to my colleagues to see whether or not they wanted to contribute to this discussion, but
Through you, Mayor Cole, just to comment on the sinking fund, to the extent that the facility is being closed and there's been no impact in terms of deterioration of the facility through use, then I think there would be some argument of a portion of that being waived because the facility hasn't had the wear and tear on it for the better part of 3 months that it hasn't been used by members of the public.
Well, CEO, what do you say to loan repayments being included?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I can quote exactly what's in the code. It specifically says that loan repayment should be deferred. Doesn't mention waiving loan repayments, but then it goes on to explain that other outgoings, and I would consider that the sinking fund would be part of that, should be waived, so proportionately. So there is a distinction made between loan repayments and the waiving of outgoings. It is complicated because it's part of the lease as opposed to being some separate loan or debt that the organisation owes us. So I think that's where, that is where the city's coming from with its recommendation. But I don't think we would have any objection to simply deferring the loan repayments instead of waiving any portion of that. And instead waiving the others.
Perhaps that's a consideration for this evening, given that we're going beyond the requirements of the code in the recommendation, that for tonight's meeting, perhaps we consider an amendment to remove loan repayments from clause 1.1. And if there's further information that needs to be brought forward to the committee in consideration to Belgravia's request, I think we'd be happy to receive that. Would the committee members be wanting to consider that as an amendment? Councillor Gontaszewski.
I would consider it an amendment, or would consider deferring the item for consideration at a subsequent meeting so that we can get some, I guess, consideration. I'm thankful to the Executive Director for his comments in relation to the code, as that does provide some clarification. So look, I'll put it at a minimum. I'll put forward an amendment to modify clause 1.1 to delete the words loan repayments, and then to move the and prior to and sinking fund contributions.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Castle. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Gontaszewski or Councillor Castle? Okay, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? I declare it carried. We're back to the substantive. Are there any further questions on this? Okay. Look, as mentioned, we are open to hearing further on this item of waiving some of the loan repayments. So I think the committee is interested in further detail and understanding how that fits with the code. Because I do think that in applying the code, we've been very fair, and we've applied the same terms to all people who have made application, all of our tier 3 category 3 tenants. So I think that it is important that if we're going to make a decision, that we understand the implications, and that is something that we'd be seeking to do across the board. I understand this is a particular set of circumstances for Belgravia, but we do just need to understand the implications of going beyond the requirements of the code. Councillor Gontaszewski.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. I just have a question in relation to if we've modified clause 1.1 to remove loan repayments, how does that impact the overall, does that impact clause 1.2 in terms of the code and the percentage of loan repayments that would be deferred, or is clause 1.2 still in alignment with the code as a result of the amendment of 1.1?
Perhaps, Director, you could help us. Does the code require a 50% deferral of loan repayments or 100% deferral?
Through you, Mayor Cole, what it requires is a deferral that aligns with any reduction in loan repayment that has come from the financial institution where the loan is held. So if the bank has deferred all loan repayments, then the lessor can should pass that on in full, that deferral. So in this case, I'm not aware of any deferral that we've received, and so the code doesn't require us to defer any of the loan repayment at all.
Through you, Mayor Cole, just following on from that then, would it be neater and better to deal with the loan repayments in total, both potential waiver and deferral in one go? Would it make more sense to take the words and loan repayments out of 1.2 as well, so that we just deal with rent, variable outgoings, sinking fund today, and then we deal with the loan repayments in total next week or whenever we have that info?
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to move a further amendment then, just to the same change to 1.2, remove the words loan repayments and move the and before sinking fund contributions.
Yes, so Councillor Gonchevsky.
I'm seconding.
Fantastic. Okay, does anyone wish to speak to this? Okay, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? Declare it carried. We're back to the substantive. I think we've all spoken. So unless there are any further questions, I'll put it. All those in favour? Declare it carried. Okay, item 7.3 is Ladywell Gardens Inc. Trust COVID-19 Relief Fund recommendations, Derbyl Yerrigan Health Service Aboriginal Corporation. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Moved Councillor Gonchevsky, seconded Councillor Castle.
I just had two questions in relation to this. One, just a general requesting general commentary in relation to how it will be determined and reported, I guess, that or within the process, the management process, that the funds will be used for Vincent residents, including people who are homeless within Vincent. And my second question relates to the use of the funds for capital purchase. We've supported an organisation to purchase capital, but for distribution to vulnerable people in the community. But I believe that to date, all of our funds have been for operational activities, and I guess in general terms, these sorts of grants often are really used for the conducting operational activities. So if I could just get some commentary in relation to the capital purchase.
Sorry, who's answering this question?
I'll answer this one.
Okay.
Through you, Mayor Cole, when we have created the expression of interest, we did allow for some minor and incidental equipment and to be included in the proposal, as long as it was fully related to the activity that is at hand, not to be sort of used to create, so if we use the example of laptops, it's not to be used for a laptop that is part of the ordinary business. It needs to be directly related to the activity that is providing support to our community. With regards to ensuring that it is our City of Vincent community that is supported, we've established a fairly clear set of criteria that is included in the grant agreement. We require them to be able to substantiate that City of Vincent residents have been supported by virtue of their address and their details. That is a little bit more difficult when it comes to homeless individuals, but we work with the provider to assess that it's reasonable that those individuals spend a proportion of their time in the Vincent area and surrounds. We require a quarterly report against those particular criteria, and we'll also provide a summary report back to council to validate that.
Thank you very much. Just one further question in relation to the request for up to 20. No, hold on. That's the confidential section. I believe it was for isolation support. A fairly substantial portion of the budget was the capital expenditure and then the isolation support. And given our current instance of COVID within the community, just wondering whether it is considered that those funds will be able to be expended.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I think that's a very good observation. Certainly what I'll do is, if this is approved by the committee for us to take it forward, I'll ensure that that criteria and the relevance of that is clearly defined in the grant application, such that we are confident it's being used appropriately.
Thank you.
Krzyzewski, there will be an opportunity to discuss the confidential attachment if you would like. We could hold this over and come back to it if there's any questions that you wanted to ask on that confidential attachment. Just wanted to let you know that.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Look, I think I'm trying to think. I'll let Councillor Castle speak on this one first and then reserve my right for later, if that's okay.
I have no questions, thank you.
Look, I take your point, Councillor Gonczewski. I think there's a combination here because the application, I think I'm just trying to work out which bit's public and which bit isn't, but I think that there's a part of the support is for street present homeless people in the City of Vincent community, and part is for people at home. So I guess if it's not isolation support, would it be, you know, what is it going to be? Is it going to be more support for homeless people, etc.? Do we need this information prior to supporting this application is the question, I think.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'm just having a look at the details. So isolation support talks about 14 days isolation support for 5% of patients living in the area in the next 6 months. So I'm assuming by reading that, and my original assumption when I read the application was that if an individual is required to isolate themselves for 14 days for whatever reason, then that is the funds that is deployed to assist them with that isolation process. If we are not in an active isolation mode, then I would be suggesting there would be that funding wouldn't be needed. So we could certainly set some criteria around the release of some of those funds with regards to isolation. I'd say if there is no isolation, then there is no need for us to acquit that grant money.
Thank you. I guess I think overall I am supportive of this. I think it is, when I consider quite high level, I think that a health service such as W Oregon is well placed to assist vulnerable members of our community.
Councillor Gonczewski, I'm just flagging with you that really you've spoken, so I just need to make sure that you're asking a question, otherwise you're closing debate.
I thought I only previously asked questions, but that's fine. I will ask a question.
Okay, if you previously only asked questions, then you are entitled to speak.
Okay, all right. I guess I think in this instance, at a high level, I'm supportive. However, I have some concerns about the budget table as provided. There's, without going into numbers, there's capital administration and potential isolation support that may or may not be needed to the same extent. However, I do believe that that is probably something that can be fleshed out at the agreement phase to ensure that the funds are going to be able to provide relief for vulnerable people, even if they are not necessarily within isolation, and but perhaps in the coming phases of COVID, where there may still be people who are less able to access health services in practice and need mobile support and are within vulnerable groups within our community. So I think I've probably got enough to get me over the line with this, but I think that, yes, there will be some need to perhaps within the agreement ensure that we're actually able to expand that listed budget item to ensure that it's more around being able to provide that care for people who may be vulnerable within the Vincent community, even if they aren't necessarily in, lockdown.
Could I perhaps make a suggestion? If you wanted to be absolutely clear, you could consider an amendment to clause 3 that after deliverables states including further discussion on the need for isolation support, if that's something that we felt strongly about.
I think it would be more, yes, the expansion of support services within the community beyond isolation is where I'm more at. But I think there's, within the whole application, I think there is sufficient information there to provide an indication of what is being proposed. It was more the line items within the budget table that I had some concern about in relation to isolation support. So sorry, I'm just trying to move between my confidential
potentially
attachment.
then deliverables including expansion of services beyond the need for isolation support.
That would be lovely, thank you.
Are you happy to move that?
Yes, I'm happy to move that.
Okay, so that's clause 3, after the word deliverables, to add the words including expansion of services beyond the need for isolation support. Oh, sorry, I needed to call for a second. Are you happy to second that, Councillor Castle?
I am, except I don't think we need the word including, because the phrase says which includes negotiating the timeframes, deliverables. I think you could just say comma, further discussion and your wording and reporting requirements.
Okay. If that does the job, that's fine. So you're happy to second that? All right. Wendy, have you got the wording there? Just making sure that was clear from us. Yeah. Comma, so yes, just comma, expansion of services, etc. Yep, okay. Right, all those in favour of the amendment, declare it carried. We're back to the substantive. We've all spoken, so unless there are any further questions, I'll put it. All those in favour, declare it carried. Okay. It was an impartiality interest, so I didn't technically need to leave the room, but that's fine. Okay, so that takes us to announcements by a presiding member. I have none this evening. Item 9, general business. Is there any general business to raise this evening? Okay, then that takes us to item 10, confidential items, matters for which the meeting may be closed. We have one on the agenda this evening, that is item 10.1. So I will call for a mover and seconder to go behind closed doors. Move Councillor Castle, seconded Councillor Gontaszewski. All those in favour, declare that carried.
It should be loud.
Thank you, everyone. Just to report back that we have considered a confidential item 10.1, Arts Relief Grants Tranche 3, and the committee has adopted the following resolution. Thank you, everyone. Just to report back that we have considered a confidential item 10.1, Arts Relief Grants Tranche 3, and the decision of the committee is that the COVID-19 Relief and Recovery Committee, Clause 1, endorses the Art Relief Grant funding for application numbers 1, 2, 4, 5, 7 and 13 as recommended in the report, and Clause 2 seeks further information about the public art elements in application numbers 10 and 12. Thank you. So there being no further business this meeting, other than to let you all know that our next meeting is on the 7th of July, and I believe we're changing to 1 p.m. for that meeting. We will continue to be live streamed. We will continue to take questions in advance of the meeting, and we will also welcome people into the chamber. So a number of ways to continue to engage with us at those meetings. So the next meeting is on the 7th of July and the following meeting on the 21st of July as we move from weekly to fortnightly meetings now that we are in phase 4, moving into phase 5 very soon. So I'll close the meeting at 6 o'clock? 6 o'clock, 6:01. Thanks, everybody.